Hi guys. This isn't the scheduled live today. I'm going to do a live at 2:30 to carve, but I needed to sharpen, and so I'd do that live too. Because why not? How's everyone doing? Hey Harold. Okay, I'm just sorting out my sandpaper here. Basically, everything needs sharpening. Good. Basically, everything needs sharpening because I didn't really do any sharpening today. I'm sorry, I didn't do any sharpening this week. I just carved and stropped. And the just stropping worked well, but I had a pretty busy week when it came to carving, so things need a quick sharpen before I strop. I get a little bit closer. Yeah, Chuck, I'm doing a live at 2:30. This is just, I had to sharpen. I didn't want to do it during the live, and I thought I might as well do it in a different live. So it's a bonus live. How are you, Chuck? So I was just doing what I tell my students not to, which is lean on this elbow. You don't want to lean on that elbow. Yeah, of course, Harold. All right, has anyone else got cabin fever yet? Ready for spring? As I tell you, I am ready. Hopefully they'll start sugaring soon, which around here is always that first feeling that spring is just around the corner. So I want to go far enough. There's actually excellent light in this room. There's only one window over there. And I want to go far enough that I can tell that I've removed any secondary bevel. Which with these hollow ground sloids from Matte White doesn't take long. But this one, you can actually see I've almost completely removed hollow ground at this point because I've sharpened it so often. This has been my main carving knife for the last 7-8 months. It gets sharpened at least once a week, so that's a lot of sharpenings. In theory, I could sharpen it less, or if I was carving less, I would be sharpening it less, but a lot of spoons have come off this knife. Yeah, and I can see I still have a little bit of secondary bevel right at the tip. That's why this method of using the flash method is so nice, because you can see exactly where you need to still do a little bit of work and where you've gone far enough. And in general, the tip of the knife requires just a little bit. It's sort of the last thing to get the secondary bevel removed. I don't know if that has to do with my technique or it's just a quirk of me, but for me it's almost always the case that secondary bevel is remaining at the tip even after it's eliminated almost everywhere else. What do people say? Hi, Kenneth. All right, everyone who's here who didn't get the memo, I'm doing my regular live at 2:30. This is just me doing a bonus live, sharpening my tools because I realized I need to do a complete overhaul of all the tools in my kit. So just looking to see. Yeah, got a little bit more to go. When you get to this last little finicky bit, if you really are removing a secondary bevel, it doesn't always pay to go back and forth like this, alternating sides. Sometimes, like you saw, it pays to just do a couple strong passes from one side. Hi, Magnus. I must be catching Sweden exactly right. There's a couple people from Sweden here. And what I've also found is that most people achieve perfect bevel on the side that's coming towards you, the side that's down when you're coming towards you first, and then you still have a little bit to go on the side going away from you. It just has to do with the fact that it's harder to see when you're going away from you. Your technique is probably a little bit less perfect, and you might also be using less pressure because it's a less stable motion. So I usually find myself having to do a couple extra passes. Oh, good, and that is perfect. I can see the scratches going all the way off the edge. Oh yeah, 7 p.m. in Sweden. Perfect timing. Alright, so now that's the 400 grit. I used the 400 grit because I knew just from how the knife was behaving that there was going to be a bit of a secondary bevel to be removed. Otherwise, I might not have gone down to 400. I might have started at 800 here. But because it had been a while since I'd sharpened, I figured I should just go with the quicker 400 grit. Now I'll just walk it up through the grits real quick. I'm slouching. Better posture, Emmett. Better posture. Ever notice that your posture gets really bad, and then you notice it and it gets better for like 2 minutes, and then it gets worse again? Anyone have any questions? I'm glancing up occasionally. So this is why when somebody tells me, oh, I've been sharpening my knife and it took me 3 hours to sharpen it, something is going wrong. You're either not using a coarse enough grit to begin with, or you're not sure when to stop, or your technique is off. Because even on a knife like this that clearly needs... I mean, if you have to remove a nick or something, that can take a long time. But, hey Daniel, I'm just saying, it's like the perfect timing for you Swedes. If you have to remove a nick, that's one thing. But if all you're doing is walking your way up through the grits, you know, removing a light secondary bevel and then walking your way through the grits, it should take you 5-10 minutes. And that's really it. So from 800, we're going to jump to 2000, just because that's what I have going on. If I had 1500 going on, that would be fine also. Notice that the sandpaper is not perfectly flat on there. That's totally fine. If I'm using good pressure, it gets flattened out before it hits the blade. It's not wrapping around the edge of the blade, going the blade at all. And I'm going towards the edge. I'm going to do a dozen passes per side, roughly. Don't count for me because I'm probably not going to do it actually. So we're in the back room of my house here. I tried doing it in the back kitchen, which is right over there, but it has it's like pressed tin paneling, and it catches the light. So even when I'm sitting with my face towards the light, there's like this like flashing metal behind me, and it really doesn't work well. So I don't know why I'm not in the front of the house, but for whatever reason I decided to be back here. All right. So this knife is my main man knife. It's funny how when you get used to a knife, you really get used to it. And you get really tuned into what it will do and won't do, how it sharpens, what you can expect from a sharpening. And once you get tuned into that, you get tuned into, you know, is it time to sharpen? Is it behaving the way I know it can behave? Have I sharpened correctly? Because sometimes you realize you haven't sharpened correctly, not because of any visual evidence, but because you sharpened and then it didn't behave like you remember it behaving last time. So there's a lot of benefits to using the smallest possible range of knives. You know, I just use one Sloyd and one hook, and you're going to see me sharpening others, but those are ones that Matt passes to me in my capacity as royal food taster or guinea pig or whatever little description you want to call it, where I'm testing out ideas he has, different types of steel, that sort of thing. But my main blue knives here, I know them like the back of my hand, probably better than the back of my hand. All right, I'll do a couple more passes. Why not? Yeah, I'm gonna have to have Matt reestablish the hollow on this knife pretty soon. Just about eliminated it. Maybe he can do it for me at the Spoonosaurus gathering. A lot of people told Matt they're coming to the first Spoonosaurus gathering end of March. I believe March 30th. That's a Saturday. It's free. It's at his house in southern New Hampshire. It's going to be cold, but he has a heated 2-car garage that's he converted to a shop with a wood stove, and the garage doors aren't there anymore. So it's all nicely tight and insulated and lovely inside. And last year we just had a fantastic time. So reach out to Matt if you want to come. Why go side to side? Why not several passes on each side at a time? I just think it keeps me in a better flow, honestly. That's what it boils down to for me, at any rate. You'll also notice that I like going through one knife all the way to completion. This is sort of my same attitude about going through one spoon all the way to completion. If I were to bounce back and forth from knife to knife, trying to pull them all up to where I drop them all at once at the end, I lose track of, what that particular knife really needs in a given moment. It's crucial with stropping to make sure you're getting right to the tip, because that tip of that knife needs to be right there on the tip. Wish you could stay and watch. You're gonna go do some other things. Yeah, have a good stream. Thanks, Kenneth. Yep, I'll see you in a bit. Hey, Matt. I'm doing an extra live today because I have the house to myself. Celia and the girls are out of the house. I did a bunch of administrative things. And I'm tuning up the knives, and then I'll do a live carve at 2:30. I have to say I've been very happy with this long strop from Tom. Shout out to Daniel Lundgren, Store Sloyd, for showing me his. I really like this feel of stropping in towards my body and away from my body in this sort of vertical manner. It just feels like what I want out of a strop. Wiping it clean, flip over. I also like that it's an extra life. Yeah. I also like that I've got the suede and the smooth leather all in one. I really appreciate tools like that don't double up something that doesn't need to be doubled up. Or I guess this is doubling up. Which is it? Is it doubling up when you have two tools in one, or is it doubling up when you have an extra tool that you didn't need to have? I don't remember. Alright. You'll see how careful I am to get that tip. And I'm watching to make sure that I have nice connection all the way to the tip. You also see I'm not letting the tip fall off the edge like that, if I can help it, because I'll end up cutting the leather in those spots. Okay. Good. That knife is done. And that was, I don't know, probably 10 minutes or so. One important thing about the long strop is that you keep the suede side on the same side that it's always on, so that the compound stays on one side of the case. So there's a little hole punched here and here to line these two things up. Keep it that way. Where did the sheath go? Okay. Now, just to spice things up, instead of doing the other sloids right now, I'll do a hook knife. So those of you who are sticking around, you don't have to stick around and watch me do a whole bunch of sloids in a row. How do Matt's knives compare to Mora? Both sloid and something like a 164. So Matt's ears are going to start burning. To my mind, Matt's knives are the best knives on the market. And his customer service is the best in the way that he's structured it, so that you can just order what you want to order without having to wait for a tool release or anything like that. I get to have some input with Matt about what makes for a good knife, both in terms of handle and blade and geometry. So I am a biased source. But that being said, I will say that Matt puts into it everything that the two of us can muster up as what would be an improvement. And he brings to it his really immaculate craftsmanship and a level of consistency and perfectionism that I myself don't have. Now, the Sloyd, especially his Pro Grind Sloyd, is longer than a Mora 106, and it's also a slightly thinner angle, which means that it's slicier and it's hollow ground. So it means that it's slicier, it's easier to do longer pivot cuts and longer sustained cuts when you're pulling towards yourself, and it's easier to maintain by hand because that hollow grind will keep the bevel from becoming convexed right up to where the hollow grind is no longer existent. Like on that blue one, it'll start to convex once I've completely eliminated the hollow grind. His handles are far, far better than the Mora handles. They're easier on your body because they keep your pinky relaxed. They're easier to sharpen because the facets give you a, the facets give you a muscle memory of exactly how your hand should be angled each time you make a pass on whatever sharpening medium you use. And I find his tools easy to sharpen and they hold an edge well. Now, as for his hooks, the hollow is not too aggressive, no. There's not really anything to worry about being too aggressive, so long as the edge holds its edge. And that really comes down to how good a job he does with the, I don't know the words, hardening and tempering or something like that, and he does an excellent job, and he's always paying attention to that, and that's also why he has me test the knife, so that if he's changing an element, he'll have me test it, and I'll give him feedback on, oh, that, the new thing is like, it's not holding its edge as well, or it's holding its edge really well, that sort of thing. So they get a lot of testing in the form of Matt, who's also a very talented carver, and me. And the hook knife, there's just no comparison between his hook knife and the Mora 164. Matt's hook knife makes the 164 look like a rickety wheelbarrow versus stepping into a modern car. They just work so much better, and you can see they're very easy to sharpen, reliable to sharpen with this way that he has. I'm not really describing the sharpening method too well here because I've done so in plenty of other videos. I mostly just want to get things sharpened. Although if people have specific questions, I'm always happy to answer specific questions. Yeah, Matt, I'm giving this one an extra sharpening. Yeah, and then the precise curvature of his monadnock hook is such that you can carve any size or form spoon quite well with it in a way that is not true for most other hooks on the market. So it's easy to sharpen, it works extremely well, and it's more versatile than any other hook I've ever seen. So yeah, and I would say, the Mora 106 is a good knife. If you're going to spend your money first, spend it on a hook knife from Matt. And then do the Sloyd. But if you just want to buy the tool that you're never going to have to replace, buy a Pro Grind Sloyd and a monadnock, and you can't go wrong. Okay. What paper am I sharpening with? So this is the 2000 at this point. I did the, where's the 3000? That's not it. There we go. I did the 400 until I felt a strong burr all the way along the edge of the back edge of the blade here. I'm a lefty, so this is, oh no, it's reversed because of the power of doing things live. So strong burr on the back, and then I started walking my way up the grit. The strong burr tells me that I've gone far enough with that original grit. You don't need to raise up more than just a burr because, every time you raise a burr, you're essentially reducing the width of the knife, and over time, if you over sharpen, you could end up reducing the width of your knife more than it needs to be. The bigger risk with over sharpening, in my mind, though, is simply that as you get tired or board or whatever, your form gets sloppy. And even if your form doesn't get sloppy, it's just we're humans, we're not robots. And so the more passes you make, the more imperfections you're introducing into the geometry. And so the less you can sharpen, the better, which just means the fewer passes. So there's, if you can make fewer passes with a stronger grit, like if you were to make 20 passes with a 400 grit, yeah, Blake, I'll save it for sure. If you were to make 20 passes with the 400 grit, but you were going to have to make 100 passes with a 1000 grit to get the same effect, well, then do the 20 passes with the 400 grit, not only because it's going to be faster, even having to walk your way up through the grits then, but also because you're introducing fewer changes into the geometry from doing so. So that's my 2 cents on that. When I do that, I want to make sure I don't go too steep because I'll ruin my edge, and I don't want to go too far back because then I won't actually, I don't know if you can see this, I won't actually be on the edge. There we go. So I want to get just right. And you know you're just right because you can actually feel that wire edge coming off. And then you can feel the back of your hand, and you'll feel it if it's still there in any spot. And you can just, again, you don't want to go over areas that you don't have to go over. There we go. Good. So, yeah, of course, man. All right, now I'm using Strop Stick from Tom Scandian. Oh, and this needs a little more honing compound. This is the Veritas honing compound. Okay, good. All right. Okay. Now, I used to strop just with a plain wooden dowel with some automotive polish, like metal polish on it. I'm not sure if it's automotive, come to think of it, just from the hardware store. And that was better than doing nothing. But using a good strop stick like this really makes a big difference in the quality of finish you get with your hook knife. And it's thin, it's I don't want to say it's like slightly over half an inch, maybe 5/8. He's from Australia, so I'm sure it's not in the metric that I'm used to. Looks like just more than half an inch, 5/8 of an inch, something like that. Doesn't really matter, as long as it's narrower than the. Oh, and you can hear that. Can you hear that lovely sort of crinkly sound? What color compounds do I use? I use just that green Veritas honing compound from Lee Valley Tools. Tom was kind enough to give me a little block of it with my long strop. Don't ask him for any. I don't think he does it for other people, although I've told him he should start offering it because I would certainly have bought some from him. And that lovely little crinkly sound that the strop makes. It's just delightful. Okay, there's no burr that I'm taking off here. I'm mostly just polishing the bevel with this. So, there we go. That's the hook knife. It's important with your strops to always have a case for your strop. Yeah, probably about that. You want the case because you want to both keep the strop leather clean and you want to keep the compound from getting off the strop and onto your tools, your hands, everything else. You want to keep things wiped down and sheathed. All right, I'm going to do more sloids now. I've got one more hook and 2 more sloids. Let's see. These are going to be pretty quick though, because they don't need 400. This one I'm going to take to 800. And it's worth getting fresh sandpaper. Sandpaper wears out quick. Just run your hand over a section of sandpaper that's been used, and you'll feel that it's not the same grit as the fresh stuff. So, use fresh sandpaper every time you sharpen. It's cheap. It's worth it. You can shuffle a single piece like this around the block to multiple locations, which is part of what I love about this system, is that it's very efficient in terms of its use of the sandpaper. Because I'm using the entire width, and then I get to use the entire length of it as well. How many spoons would you say you could do between sharpenings? I do a lot, man. I do, sometimes it depends. I've been trying to strop more just to see if I can maintain that amazing edge that you get when you strop. So I've been stropping every, I don't know, I had this goal that I was going to strop before I carved every spoon, and I haven't met that goal yet, but maybe every 2 or 3 spoons, and then sharpen maybe every 10 or 15 spoons, something like that. That's probably about where I'm at these days. Very happy with the finish I'm getting on the spoons with that regime. And as I get towards the 10 to 15 end of them, I'm probably stropping more often to make up for the fact that my edges are not quite as pristine. So what I'm doing here, the reason I'm sharpening this knife is not because it was dull from use, but because when I used it, it was leaving little track marks, which tell me that there's a tiny little chip in the blade. So I'm looking real closely to make sure that I actually remove that. Get down below that, otherwise that will remain. So that's the purpose of this. And one of the reasons I'm not going to the 400 grit is I don't think a grit that coarse, while it will get underneath it, it'll also make it more difficult to see when I have eliminated such a tiny little waver in the blade. So that's why I'm sticking with the 800. And you also need to wipe off your blade before you look at it, otherwise you're not going to be able to tell what you're looking at. Yeah, there's still a tiny little bit right up at the tip there. Alright, this part of the sandpaper is now smooth, so shuffle it around. We get to the last little bit. It hasn't been used except for the ends, and the ends get used wrapped around the dowel. So you end up using every little scrap of the sandpaper. It's very resourceful way to use sandpaper. Feels so good to use a fresh section. Just feel that drag right there. If you are unsure what is happening when you're sharpening your knives and you are not getting the results that you want and you're not sure what's going on, stop and observe at every stage of the way and look at the scratch marks. My YouTube channel is just my name, Emmett Van Drysch. Same as my handle. You can stop and look at the scratch marks, and the scratch marks will tell you what's going on. So for instance here, I'm seeing scratch marks that go right out to the edge. I don't see any little shadowing right at the edge that would tell me that there was a little, almost microscopic little scallop in the edge. So I'm good. I'm going to go up through the grits now. Alright, the 2000, fresh piece. Yeah, these bits of sandpaper on their last legs. There. So, there we go. Notice how I'm gently rocking from the back onto the bevel each time. And that's to prevent me from landing edge on. You always want to land spine and then rock onto the bevel. Because if you try to just nail it and hit flat down on the bevel each time, guaranteed you're not going to nail it. You're going to end up dulling your blade down there. See, other carvers glue the sandpaper to the block and use that for a long time. Yeah, that seems silly to me. It's a step to glue it on. It's a step to take it off. Then you got glue residue on your block. You got to wipe that off with acetone. And then there's also, I know me, if there's a bunch of steps that I have to do to change the sandpaper, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to not change the sandpaper. So for me, it's all about making it as easy as possible for me to do the right thing, because let's face it, folks, I'm lazy. Okay, good. It's about a dozen strokes. Just checking with the flash method to make sure that things still look good. They do. Good. Now we go up to that finest grit. Yeah, I think it's important understanding the human psychology behind a process. If you are a perfectionist, then probably gluing the sandpaper down is going to work for you, because you're not going to have any problem with all of the telling yourself to change the sandpaper because you want it to be perfect and all of the process that goes along with that. I am not a perfectionist, and I would definitely get sloppy with that, and I'd end up using sandpaper that was past its natural lifespan. Do you see how I cut that sandpaper there? But it's just not a big deal. Lazy but efficient. Well, that's kind of you. So this is why I don't start up here, because what ends up happening is you'll end up slicing the sandpaper if you start with part of the blade off the sandpaper. Start with the entire blade on the sandpaper, and you'll never cut the sandpaper. I never said that before. See? Say new things each time you do this sort of thing. Alright, good. Part of the reason I'm sharpening this sloyd and that hook that I just sharpened is because those are ones that Matt is having me test some design things and some different steels, and so one of the things I found was that the steel that's different than what he makes his main tools with retains its edge a little bit longer, but is also harder to sharpen. And so I had not done a great job sharpening. And so I'm going back, resharpening, seeing if that makes a difference, use it a little bit more, see how it retains its edge. This is the kind of quality control that Matt's tools undergo, so that you know when you buy a tool from him that he's designed them and made them using real information about how that steel performs. Not just once, not in a test cut, not under weird circumstances, but being used to carve spoon after spoon after spoon. So wow, I'm really shilling for Matt this year, here at this time. Do I think it's necessary to go further with the grit? Let's say 4,000 or something like that. No, I tried once going, I go up to 3,000, and I tried once going to like 5,000 or 7,000. And I think as long as you're stropping afterwards, there's no benefit. If you don't own a strop, it's probably worth getting a 7,000 grit paper. But, you know, a strop compound is probably 15,000 grit. At least a compound like this, and then I don't even know what the smooth leather is. So you're not getting comparable results from using the higher sandpaper. And everyone has their sort of limit of how much you're willing to do. Because you can get from, you know, a 3,000 grit to, you know, it just means you strop more to sort of get the same edge. And if you were to insert a 5,000 grit into there, it means that you have to strop less, because you would have created smaller scratches that would require less passes on the strop to replace with the newer, finer scratches. Yeah, of course, man. So um, so yeah, so it's, I don't, with that being said, I do know some people who use the finer sandpaper, and I also know some people who go straight from 1,000 to stropping. So uh, there's lots of different ways of getting there. Um, it's kind of a choose your own adventure. Hey, as long as I have people's attention, all 9 of you, did you know that we are in the period where you can sign up for Spoonosaurus magazine and get the next issue, which is coming out in the middle of April? It's going to have an interview with Yoav Elkayam. Yoav, I think it's Yoav Kafetz. It's this Israeli guy who's been traveling around in a van. He's a pole lathe turner and a spoon carver and a hero of mine. And it's going to have an article on harvesting spruce root and using it, processing it and using it for things like bark sheaths. And it's going to have an article that I'm going to write, possibly Matt's going to write something as well, on carving the bowls of spoons and how that relates to grain flow within the bowl of spoons. So you can go, excellent question. If you go to spoonosaurus.com, that's SPOONESAURUS, like a dinosaur, Spoonosaurus. Spoonosaurus.com. There's subscription buttons that take a minute to load. So everything else on the website will load, and you'll be twiddling your thumbs, and then the PayPal buttons will show up. And there are 2 PayPal buttons. There's a domestic US one and an international one. Make sure you choose the right one. And yeah, thank you for that. And then PayPal will walk you through the subscription. Once you're subscribed, you're all set. It'll just every quarter re-hit your account, and you'll continue to just get the magazine in the mail. Okay, just for variety's sake, let's do the old faithful hook knife here. This is my favorite hook knife so far that Matt has ever made for me. I've gone through all the iterations over the last year and a bit that he's been making them. Isn't it crazy that Matt's only been making hook knives for such a short period of time? Really, it's kind of nuts. Let me get right down to it. You know what? It's time for a different sheet of 400 grit. There we go. You put a L-I-K in a picture. Not sure what you mean by that, Harold. Okay, here we go. Now you'll notice this block on my knee. This is really important because if I were to just either hold this steady, it would be hard to get the angle right, or if I were to pin this down with a handle on something, sort of like if I were to use hold fast, like what Dawson Moore, Michigan Sloyd recently had in an IGTV clip. The problem is that when you lock it down like that, there's only one motion that is the perfect motion to get exactly on the edge the way that you want. Whereas if you place it like this on a surface that's narrow enough that the dowel can rock with it, then this can make little adjustments in my hand. The dowel will ride right along with it. Put a link in a picture. I don't think I have enough followers to do a swipe up like that, but that's a good idea. So this is just the same block that I wrapped the sandpaper around, so it's serving multiple functions. And notice that my thumb is up like this, so I'm up like that. If I hold it like this, it's just an awkward motion. So it's better to have it rocked up slightly like that. Make sure I really get to the tip of the blade. And I'm going away from the edge. The sharp edge is this side over here. So I'm pushing away from the edge, and it's a push and a twist. Both are important. If you only twist, you won't be creating the wire edge that tells you, the burr that tells you that you've gone far enough. So you need to do both. You also won't be using the full length of the sandpaper. So, and again, you only want to go until you feel that burr on the back edge. And again, I get the burr down here. It's not quite up the tip yet, so I'm going to lift it up a little higher and just do a couple passes right at the tip. Because again, I don't want to remove more steel than I have to, and I don't want to make more passes than I have to. There we go. All right. Nope, still not quite there. There we go. Let's just do a little bit more. Push and a twist, a push and a twist. Hold on, I'll check out that question in just a sec. Let's see if we've got a burr. Ooh, nice strong burr. Good. Okay. How do I protect my blades when you're going to travel? Let's say when you're not carving for a while, like person who uses W40, you want to know what you use. I'm probably not the best person to ask that question because honestly, I mean, the longest I've ever left my blades has been like a week. You know, I do this for a living, so I carve basically every single day. And even on the weekends, it's rare for me to go both weekend days without doing any carving. I didn't carve anything yesterday, but I'm going to be carving something today. So I just don't find that is a problem. I also don't live near the coast, so I don't have salt water, nor do I live in a very humid, jungly condition. I mean, what's recommended is just that you wipe them down with a little mineral oil, and that should be fine. But honestly, anything, you know, like my spoon wax, get a little of that on your fingers, wipe it over the blades, should be totally fine. Really, it's just about putting a little film of some sort of oil, wax, whatever, on the metal so that it protects it from the air. That's it. So, you know, my tools live in a closed box in a dry house, and I've never done anything to them and never had a problem. That being said, my axe lives out in my stump, and same deal. I've wiped it down maybe 2 or 3 times over the last year and a bit that I've used it, and right, there's no point in feeling the back. I don't know why I'm feeling the back. You just do a certain number of passes. That burr is still there. It's going to get smaller as you go along. What grit was this? 800. But it won't get eliminated until I do the passes on the back with the 3000 grit. So yeah, you know, if you're in a near the coast where you've got salt in the air, if you're in a tropical zone, you're gonna want to do something. But I don't think it really matters what you do. And like I've left my axe out on a stump in a covered woodshed, but definitely open to the elements where it gets wet and all that. It's totally fine. I've treated the head and the handle maybe once in the last year, and I just use it regularly, and that keeps it all rust free. The draw knife, on the other hand, definitely can stand being protected a bit more. Whatever steel the draw knife is, it rusts like crazy. So I think it also depends on the steel of the tools you've got. So it's worth paying attention to that. And last but not least, notice how I'm wrapping the sandpaper up on, well, now I just went from 2000 to 3000 grit, and that'll be my last grit. Notice how I put the sandpaper on 1/2. That means that when I hold it, this can come up against here, and it means I don't have to hold it as tightly. If I were to put the sandpaper in the middle, it would mean that this would come up in my palm here, and I'd be gripping it much more tightly to hold it steady. So having it down at one end of what is essentially an 8-inch length of dowel is very helpful. Okay, got this, good. Now again, this is a long sharpening session for me because I'm doing 4 tools and then I'm taking them all back. But if I'm doing only 2 tools, well, that's half the time, which is another reason why I tend to just use, 2 tools at a time. The only reason I have that other Sloyd and hook is because I'm testing them from Matt. I'm a big believer that if you have the right tool, if you have a versatile hook, and you have the right Sloyd for you, then you don't need multiples. You don't need one that's, for finishing cuts and one that's not. You don't need, if you're treating them right and you're maintaining them well, you don't need that. And you definitely don't need multiple hooks, or hooks that are lefties and righties and lefties. You don't need open sweep versus tight sweep if you have the right curve to a hook, which the Monadnock does. I had an open sweep from Robin Wood way back when he first started bending them by hand. That was the right sweep, and it was basically the sweep that this Monadnock now has. And then Robin changed them, and I wrote to him and said, hey, I just bought some new knives to teach with, and they're a different curve, they're different how they're canted over the handle, they don't work as well. And he very politely said, well, they are what they are. And so one of the things that Matt was trying to capture with his Monadnock was that, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to remove the wire edge from the back here. There we go. You don't have to use sandpaper. You can just use the plain dowel, and that will remove that wire edge just fine. So that curve of that original Robin Wood hook knife is what we were capturing with the Monadnock curve, because I found it so versatile, and I was able to carve small spoons, big spoons, scoops, you name it. And there's just something about this curvature with this tilt over the handle, and the way that the curve is basically a continuous curve. It doesn't compound, it doesn't change as you go along. It's the difference in using wet sandpaper versus ordinary sandpaper. Not that I know of. I certainly don't. I use my sandpaper dry because, I don't know, wet sandpaper sounds like a mess and a pain in the neck, and I probably wouldn't do it. Again, going back to me being lazy. So, I don't know, it sounds to me like wet dry sandpaper sounds more expensive. So it might be worth doing a price comparison to make sure you're not paying twice as much just for the ability to use it wet, which, quite frankly, you don't need. I love that little creaky leather sound you get with this one. It's the best. I used to really dread sharpening my tools. First of all, back a couple years ago, I did not know how to sharpen my tools well. And then I went through a phase where I kind of knew, but I would dread it. And now I actually really like it. Because I know the results I'm going to get. And they're predictable. And they just make such a huge difference in the ease of carving and in the finish that I'm able to achieve. Which, the nice thing about getting a good finish right off the bat is that sometimes you make a cut early on in the spoon, and if your knife is in good shape and it's a nice clean cut, and the wood isn't too wet, and it's been a clean cut, you didn't tear any fibers, man, that cut lasts and lasts right through to the end of the spoon. You just made the finishing cut right at the opening gambit. It's a lovely thing. As long as I'm here making a mess, well, no, I guess, alright, I guess I just gotta repack my box here. Oh, hey man, how you doing? Alright, so, in this box, just some extra things. I wanted to see, yeah, that doesn't quite fit. Alright, and this part fits the long straw, compound, and the rag. Good. And here I've got my spoon wax and 3 hook knives, the 2 Monadnocks, and then this is the one from Robin. You can see has that same curvature. But again, I basically just use the one. I've got some plastic bags in here, probably too many, I just need one. Got plastic bags in here so that if I have a spoon blank that needs a plastic bag to maintain its moisture, good. I've got my broom corn polisher, porcelain burnisher. Let's go over there, let's go there. And then I've got see. I think that's used up. That's still got some life to it. And that one is used up. And then, this is what I love about the sandpaper. The whole thing fits in the box. Just finished up some edge beating on a knife sheath. Yeah, those knives you've been making, man, have been sweet. Nice job with those. So, sandpaper block, dowel, strop stick, boom, boom. And then I've got my 3 sloids, a bunch of wood shavings, some pencils. And that, as I said, is that. Thanks, guys. I'm going live at 2:30. Hey, thanks, Maurice. I really appreciate that. I'll see you guys in a bit.